So in this video, we're going to be talking about how to pay 3 to 2. So 3 to 2 is another pay ratio that you're probably going to come across while you guys are dealing. There's 6 to 5 and there's 3 to 2. How do you know when you're going to pay which one? On the table itself, as you'll probably see here, it says Blackjack pays 3 to 2. Most tables are going to let you know what the pay ratio of that table is going to be. So you usually are not going to pay 3 to 2 and 6 to 5 on the same table. Although it can happen, but it's usually not a thing. Usually if there's one table that's 3 to 2, it stays 3 to 2. If there's a table that's 6 to 5, it stays 6 to 5 is usually how that goes. So 3 to 2 is based on the concept of time and a half or 150%. So if you guys have ever had to deal with overtime before, overtime means, let's say you're getting paid $10 an hour. So let's say we have $10 here. You're getting paid $10 an hour. In order to determine what a 3 to 2 amount would be on this amount, first what we need to do is we need to divide that number in half. So what's 10 divided by 2? It's going to be 5. So what we do is we take that 5 and we add it to that 10. Now our total is 15. So if someone had a $10 bet and then they got paid 3 to 2, they would get paid 15. So long story short, 3 to 2 is basically the bet plus half of the bet. That's essentially what it is. Sometimes figuring out what half of the bet is a little bit difficult, but I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that we employ in order to find an easier route to get our payments. Next example, let's say that the bet was 20. First thing we're going to do is divide it by 2. So 20 divided by 2, or divide in half, is 10. Let's take that 10 and let's add that to our 20. And what are we left with? 30. So 20 would pay 30. Makes sense because 3 to 2. Let's break this down slightly more simply. Anytime that you see 2 of something that are of equal value, it will always receive 3 of that thing. So for example, I have 2 reds, it will get 3 reds in return. If I happen to have 2 whites, it's going to receive 3 whites. It doesn't matter what the color is or the dollar value. Let's say I happen to have this here. I happen to have 2 stacks of equal value. If I'm doing 3 to 2, 2 stacks of equal value means that that's going to receive 3 stacks of equal value. 3 to 2. Anytime you see 2 of something on a bet, it's always going to receive 3 of that thing. Just remember that, and I guarantee you that's going to come in handy in these future examples. Now, before we dive a little bit deeper into 3 to 2, there are some really common and somewhat troublesome, bets that someone can make that will raise their heads eventually. And so what we want to do is we want to try our best to take the time to memorize those first. So what I want you to do is take out a pen and a paper, or just get something to write notes on, and I want you to write these down. These are going to be the more troublesome or more common ones that you should take the time to memorize. First is going to be $15. So $15, if we pay that 3 to 2, so 15 equals $22.50. So go ahead and write that down. Next, we're going to go to $25. $25 is going to equal $37.50. The next one, let's go to $35. $35 is going to equal $52.50. We only have a couple left. Next one, $75. At the time that I happened to learn Blackjack a few years ago, the $75 bet was the most common bet in Blackjack. That may still be the case, may not, depends on when you watch this video. So if you memorize any of these that are on this list I'm telling you right now, you want to memorize $75. So $75 is going to equal $112.50. We only have one left. The last one is going to be $150. $150 is going to pay $225. So keep that with you while you're practicing 3 to 2 and try to dedicate your time to memorizing those ones. It doesn't matter what version of 3 to 2 that you use. There's a lot of different versions, but there's 2 main ones that I use. I'm going to show you the math version, and I also have a no math version or a math-free version that's going to be in a separate video. So if you're interested in figuring that out, then go ahead and check that video out. So it doesn't matter what version you use, those numbers that you just wrote down will become important eventually. So it's best to get them out of the way now so you know what to reference later. So let's move on to a couple of examples. Let's start off with $100. So someone decided to bet $100. You could probably figure out what that payment's going to be. Go ahead and take a moment to pause the video if you need to, so that way you can get the answer, and then I'll explain it to you in a second. So, welcome back. The answer is going to be 150. How do we figure that out? Let's look at the total amount here. We have 100. 100 divided by 2 is 50. 100 plus 50, we get 150. Next one. Let's say that we happen to have $25. This is where things are going to get slightly more difficult with the math. So $25, this is another important one. This is one of the ones that you just wrote down. $25 is going to pay $37.50. How do we determine that? Half of 25 is $12.50. 25 plus $12.50 is going to be $37.50. Now, no one really likes doing the math, or at least I don't. So you're going to want to try to memorize those numbers that I had you write down a second ago, because I'm telling you, you already saw it come up right now. It's going to be important and it's going to be helpful. So let's move on to the next example. Let's say that we have a random bet. Erica, go ahead and give me a number.
$122.
$122. All right. Now, if we try to take this entire number, 122, and we try to divide it in half and then add that to the original number, fortunately 122 is an even number, so it's a little bit easier to do that as opposed to an odd number. I want to express the concept that you don't have to tackle the entire number at once and try to do all of the math in your head. Try to break the numbers up into what makes sense, that makes it a little bit easier to manage. So for example, instead of 122, what I would probably do instead is I'll do 100, and then I'll do 22. Here's how this works. Let's ignore the 22. We'll do that in the second part. Let's just do the 100. We did this a second ago. So 100, half of 100 is 50. 100 plus 50 is 150. So this black is going to pay 150. Now what we have remaining is 22. The math should be pretty easy. What's half of 22? 11. And then 22 plus 11 is 33. So let's bring out 33. All we have to do is combine our answers. And this is going to be the correct amount for this. And if anyone is interested in finding out how much it is, it's going to be $183 to pay a $122 bet. So let's move on to the next example. All right, next example. Erica, what's the other number?
88.
88? 88. Let's do it. All right, so the example this time is $88, as you can see here. So, like I said before, break it into what makes sense first. Don't always try to tackle the entire bet in one shot. So what I would recommend here is this. Do 80 and then do 8. So let's start with 80. 80 is a nice even number. It's easy to do math with. So try to determine what an $80 bet would pay for 3 to 2. Go ahead and take a second. The answer is going to be 120. How did we figure that out? Half of 80 is 40. 80 plus 40 is 120. So let's bring out 120. So 120 is handled. Next, over here we have $8 remaining. So if you know how 3 to 2 works, this should be relatively simple. Half of 8, 4. 8 and 4 is 12. So we bring out $12. Then we combine our answers. Regarding this amount here that you could have colored up to a green, at this stage of you learning 3 to 2, don't worry about it right now. You're going to be able to figure this out later on as you become more comfortable with 3 to 2. Right now, your goal should be just getting the correct answer first. As you become more comfortable, you'll be able to get around that, no problem. So if anyone's interested in finding out how much it is, so we have a $88 bet that's going to end up paying $132 as payment. This next example, let's go with something a little bit more difficult. Let's say 777. So let's set that up. All right, so just like this. So we have $777. Don't do the math on it. Try to break it up into what makes sense. So let's do 700 first, and then we'll deal with the rest after that. So let's start with 700. Half of 700, 350. 700 plus 350, 1,050. So let's bring that out. Bring out 1,050. Beautiful. So 700 pays 1,050. So 700 out of 777 is done. All we have is 77 remaining. So let's go to 75. You should have written this one down. Remember, the most common bet in blackjack. 75 is going to pay $112.50. So I'm about to bring out $112.50. But before I do that, let's look at what we have remaining. We have $2 remaining. And if you remember what I said before, anytime you see 2 of something, it gets 3 of that thing. So 2 gets 3. So $2 gets $3. So let's try to add $3 to $112.50. We get $115.50. So let's bring that out now. So we're going to bring out $115, and we're just going to say that this yellow here is 50 cents. All we have to do is combine our answer, and we're done. Just like that. So let's see what our answer was. We ended up getting $1,165.50. There you go. Now, complicated bet, although as long as you know how to break it down into what makes sense, or the easier route, it becomes easy. You don't have to do the whole thing at once. Let's move on to the next example. In this example, someone doesn't like you. They decide to give you a giant tower of a bet. And a lot of new dealers, when you see something like this, you are not going to know what to do, and you are probably going to freak out. I was there before too. I was exactly the same way. But the thing is, I want you to remember anytime this happens, it's scary because you don't know how much it is. Just remember that. So first, we need to find out how much is there. We're going to start by clearing our hands, and then we're going to cut this bet out. So we're looking at $135. So remember, don't do the whole thing at once unless it's easy. 135, the math is not going to be fun on this one. So break it into manageable sections that make sense to you. So I would go with 100 first. So let's start with 100. That's going to be these 4 right here. Anytime that you see 5 red like this, the 5 red is just going to be a green, and we have 4 greens, so 4 greens is going to be 100, or a black essentially. So we have $100. And as we know from previous examples, 100 is going to pay 150. So let's just bring out 150 to get that out of the way. So now this is already handled. So let's actually move that a little bit. What we have remaining is 35. If you remember what you guys wrote down, 35 pays $52.50. So I can bring out $52.50. Combine my answer, and I'm done. You don't need to know how much you're paying in the end. All you need to know is that it's correct. And as long as you break it down in sizes that make sense, the bet or the payout will always be correct. But if you don't happen to have this memorized, I'll explain to you how we can still get the same answer. So let's start this over. So the 100 should be relatively easy to handle, because it's going to be simple math. Half of 100 is 50. 100 plus 50 is 150. So let's bring out 150, and let's get this big chunk taken care of. What we have remaining is $35. But the math on 35, not that great. So make it easy on yourself. Remember, find the easy solutions. Let's do 30. It's an easy number to do math on. And then we'll do 5 when we're done. So let's start with 30. Half of 30 is 15. 30 plus 15 is 45. So let's just bring out $45 just to get it out of the way, so that way you don't have to kind of hold it in your head and then add this last $5. So now our last is $5. Half of $5 is $2.50. $5 plus $2.50, $7.50. So let's bring out $7.50. And just like that, we end up achieving the same answer. If anyone is interested what 135 is going to pay, it's going to be $202.50. That's how much it would pay if you were paying it 3 to 2. So we only have a couple more examples. If this is already making sense to you, then by all means go ahead and stop the video and take off from here. But I noticed that there's a lot of or I guess lack of information on the internet regarding exactly how to pay 3 to 2. That's why I'm giving you guys so many examples. So let me try and do a little bit more of a ludicrous example on this next one. In this example, I'm going to cover a weird bet. We're going to do $393. They're all odd numbers. Anytime you have odd numbers, the math is never fun. So this is one of the worst bets, plus it's a rainbow bet. We have black, we have green, we have red, we have white. We have a little bit of everything. So this is going to be a pain for a lot of new people to try to deal with. So let's try and manage what we can. So let's start with the hundreds. All of this here is not going to add up to 100. But this, I have 300, and the math on 300 should be relatively simple. So if you happen to know what it is, go ahead and write it down. But 300, half, 150. 300 plus 150, 450. So let's just bring out 450. Let's get this out of the way. So we're done with this. So 300 pays $450. Next, I have 75, which you already have written down, or you should memorize, pays $112.50. However, anytime that you can make the math make sense, try to do as much as you can in one shot. If I do all the black, and then I do all the green, and then I do all the red, and then I do all the white, and I will probably end up with a giant tower in the end of a bunch of stuff I could have colored up, but it's usually easier if we try to tackle everything at once, as much as you can, as long as it makes sense. In this example, I would do this instead. I would end up doing 90 together, do the 3 reds and the 3 greens together. The math on 90 shouldn't be too bad. It's an even number, it ends in a 0, so it shouldn't be that hard. So for example, 90. Half of 90 is 45. 90 plus 45 is 135. So let's bring out 135. 135. And now lastly, I have $3 remaining. Do the math on it. Half of $3, $1.50. $3 plus $1.50 is $4.50. So let's bring out $4.50. And just like that, I have my answer. All I'm going to do is combine everything, and I'm done. Also, to keep in mind, anytime that you guys are paying 3 to 2, it is extremely common for you to heel your payments. What I mean by a heel is instead of having a bet look like this, and then you take your 3 to 2 payment and you try to find some way that makes sense to size into everything, it's not usually going to make sense to try to size in. There's some that it does work out, but it doesn't always. So it's better for you to prove your payment on the shuffle pad first to the cameras, and then stack everything up in the proper order, just like this. And when you take it to the bet, that's already broken down, because remember, if you break down a bet in order to pay it, it stays broken down. Once you go to the bet, you just drop a single check from the bottom and place the rest on the side at an angle. This should be considered a universal sign of a payoff. This is known as a heel. You can heel any payment as long as you prove what the bet was and what you paid. As long as you prove both, you don't have to size into anything because you've already proven it. Sizing in is a form of proving. You can just pay it off just like that and then move on to the next player. Let's do one final example. All right, this is the final one. This. Everyone probably not going to be very happy about this, but players can bet whatever they want as long as it's within the table limits. So you will probably come across this one day, and you'll have to be able to figure it out. So let's get this handled. So we'll start off by cutting out the green, and then we'll cut out that red. All right, so first thing I'm going to do, let's find out how much the total dollar value is, see if the math is going to be simple on it. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 75 plus this one makes it another 100, so we have $825. So the math actually is pretty easy on this one. Let's get rid of this one, and let's do this. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, $800. And we'll do $25 after we're done with this. 800 is a nice even number that's easy to do math on. So what's half of 800? 400. 800 plus 400? 1200. Let's bring out 1200. In this example, I'm just going to bring out purple. Purple is going to be $500 each. So let's bring out 1200. And just like that, I just took care of the majority of this entire bet, when a lot of people would have been really scared when they first saw that bet, and then they finally get a blackjack, they got to pay 3 to 2, and then the whole world crumbles. Not always the case. You just are scared of it because you don't know how much is there. That's a prime example of what I'm talking about. So 800 is handled, pays 1,200. What I have remaining is $25. All this right here. And if you have that paper where you wrote down those numbers I mentioned earlier, you should already know what it pays, but let's go through the math. You can do 20, do the 3 to 2, and then do 5, and then do 3 to 2, and then combine your answers. For example, 20, half of 20 is 10, 20 and 10 is 30. So let's remember 30. Then we have 5 remaining. Half of 5 is $2.50. 5 plus $2.50, $7.50. So we have 30 plus $7.50. Put them together, $37.50. Now, if you have it memorized, just remember, $25 pays $37.50. So we're going to bring out $37.50. And just like that, we combine our answer, and we're done. So I hope this made sense on how to pay 3 to 2. It does take an immense amount of practice, so much so to the point that when I did my first dealing school, I literally quit because of 3 to 2. I know I can preach to you now like I'm a master at it, and honestly, I know 3 to 2 extremely well now, but it did take me some time, but I didn't have the level of explanation that I'm having or that I'm giving you now. So hopefully this made sense to someone out there. And if you guys have any other questions, feel free to try to reach out and I will try to help any way I can. So hopefully this works, and I'll see you guys in the next one.